View from the Gutters, episode 154. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning, the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode of View from the Gutters, we discuss Gladstone School for World Conquerors by Mark Andrew Smith and Armand Villavert Jr. Thank you to all of our Patreon sponsors for contributing to the show. And a special thank you to this week's episode sponsor, Brian May.
All right, episode 154. This is Brant Gillihan-Eddy.
I'm Joe Preti.
I'm Deforge.
I'm Kayleigh Fleeman.
And I'm Tobiah Panshin.
All right, welcome everybody.
Eat my cookie now.
Now that that's
We're having fun tonight.
eroded into absolute cookie-related chaos.
We are just, it's happening tonight. It is happening tonight.
Help me die.
So, now that I have seized control of this podcast, I'll do announcements. Ha! As a reminder to everyone, the View from the Gutter store is now online. Come, give us your money and we'll give you our wares with View from the Gutters t-shirts.
Right now.
More
to come.
stuff will come.
Yes.
But for now, it's t-shirts. T-shirts and t-shirts. Also a reminder that the long run for Bone, we're hoping to record in the last part of February, so hopefully we'll see that drop in the beginning of March. I was about to say May, but that's not the month that comes after February.
Is it
This
not?
year.
Because later.
Is it my pick next for the long run?
Yes.
Oh shit, I should be thinking about that.
Yes, you should.
Well, luckily you've got a couple of weeks to really meditate
Oh
on that.
fuck.
Yeah, meditate on it, Joe.
Meditate.
Yeah, meditate.
That is the mantra for this evening is meditate. That's a lot of weird
Tonight's
mindfulness things all mixed
tonight's watchwords are meditation, cookie, and doot.
Dude,
And the number 3.
I was gonna say, I was thinking more Pee-wee's Playhouse.
There we go. We could do that. Cherry.
All right, so this week was my redemption pick. Ha Gladstone School for World Conquerors, Volume 1 by Mark Andrew Smith and Armand Villavert. Villavert? Or do we think that that's the right? Villavert?
Yeah. That sounds-
yes.
That sounds
I'm pretty sure it's
French
not.
enough.
Villavert.
Like in them words.
It has
We'll go with it.
correctitude.
Yeah. Just a gentle, lightweight synopsis for those who might not know. This book follows the adventures of a group of 5 kids enrolled in Gladstone School for World Conquerors. Kid Nefarious, Martian Jones, Mummy Girl, Ghost Girl, and the Skeleton Brothers. Actually, that's 6 kids. The Skeleton Brothers are actually 2 people.
In theory.
In theory. As they learn how to become great supervillains. However, this is against a backdrop of secretive machinations between supervillains and superheroes the worldwide, where basically it's wrestling and they throw matches.
Would you say surreptitious?
Oh my God.
Perhaps.
Mm.
So yeah, lightweight, stars kids, kind of a quick clip read. I only pitched the first volume because the Kickstarter for Volume 2 only recently, well, it wrapped a little while ago. I guess the last issue of Volume 2 shipped maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, from what I can tell.
Can I say how heartening and glad I am to hear that Volume 2 is a thing that is going to exist?
Yeah. Apparently, they've got the Kickstarter for Volume 3 up, or it's
oh my
coming.
God.
Ooh.
I got to get on that.
Yeah. But, yeah, I don't think this book is perfect. I pitched it because I don't think it's perfect, but I think there's a lot of really, really interesting stuff that's fun, that is both kind of interesting and unique, but also calls back to some really great kind of tropey superhero goodness. And yeah, I wanted us to take a look at it and discuss.
And discuss we shall.
Indeed.
And I'll jump right into it. I actually really enjoyed this book, almost despite myself to a certain extent. And I mean, I don't want to say that I disliked it at any point. It was really reminiscent of a lot of different things for me. Aaron Williams, I think it's PS 318 or something like that. The school for young super beings. My biggest complaint, honestly, was I wish there was more of this. He's obviously setting up a lot of storylines in these first 6 issues that aren't capitalized on at the end of the 6 issues, and it's obvious that he wanted to do more with it.
Yeah.
So I'm really like, it very much changes the context of this for me, knowing that there is more in the pipeline. But I found this a really enjoyable read. Kind of the dealing with one of the central rubs of the superhero genre, this idea of like, well, there's heroes and they're villains, and like, why haven't they radically altered the world, is one that I think we've seen chewed over a lot in recent years. And I think that this does a pretty good job of doing it. It's not super novel or like, oh my God, I never thought of that, but it's done really well. It's a really solid universe. The pieces all seem to operate together. It's got a really great cast of characters. Everybody's interesting, and you can see the sense of them as like lineage characters or legacy characters.
Right.
And it's cool to see like how some of them are a mix of their parents' powers.
Right.
So there was a lot going on here that I found really interesting conceptually, and I was really eager to hear more about.
Yeah, I think one of the things that roped me into reading the book in the first place is, as I've gotten older, I find myself actually drawn to a certain kind of cartoon style that has a lot of bright coloration to it. And for me, like, this is almost like reading more Venture Brothers on the page.
That's
which is
what
something
I wanted
that I
to
absolutely
say.
adore, which is that kind of, it's tropey, but it's also making fun of the tropes. It's making a lot of sideways references and slightly rolling its eyes at it. But it seems like it's coming from a place of genuine enthusiasm about its source material. The color, like there's a lot of vicious stuff that's happening. There's a lot of violence, but it's like the bright palette offsets it in this kind of fun way where it's like, yay, violence.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know, just really pleased.
I was trying to remember what I wanted to compare it to, because Venture Brothers season 6, episode 1 dropped the Sunday before we recorded this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The new season just started after like 2 years of being off. And so I was like, I watched that, and then I immediately jumped into this. And so I had a lot of these same superhero deconstruction tropes bouncing around in my brain.
It's Venture Brothers in the sheets, Teen Titans in the streets.
There you go.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah,
definitely Teen Titans.
Well,
Because
there was a lot of the Teen Titans stuff. Kayleigh, you just showed me a panel that it goes to that like manga inspired
chibi,
squishitude. Yeah.
Yeah, squishy character where they're laughing and being evil, like, whoa, but they're like this tiny, cute, bendy arm, giant head, fluffy thing.
And that keeps things light and stuff too. And like at one point I kind of at least visually I had to kind of stop on a couple pages and go, holy fucking exposition, Batman, because you had tons of those. But the good part of that was, even though my initial feeling was like, wow, that's a lot of text that you aren't showing me what's happening, I went, no, but the mood of the book, the personality of the book, this is totally okay. It didn't feel like I was overwhelmed once I was physically reading it.
Yeah.
It looked overwhelming on a page, but the actual engagement with the text was exactly that Venture Brothers kind of sensibility where tons and tons of words are coming at you, but it wouldn't be itself. It wouldn't be the fun, playful kind of tone without that kind of humor coming through the text to the degree that it does.
Yeah, I wondered to a certain extent, as an image book, I realized that some of these projects don't have as much strong editorial presence as something that's produced under a publishing house. And so it struck me that I agree, like especially in the first couple of issues, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of stuff you're kind of vomiting at me. And I agree with you that for the most part I walked away not being super upset, but I did find myself conscious of it in the moment. But I feel like the creative team really found their footing quickly after that, because it's not like we get less information in the preceding or than the next 4 issues. It's just that it's presented I just feel like they managed to figure out ways to present it more dynamically. Of course, the one giant dump of information that comes in the middle of that is their tribute to Scott Cloud Mummy Girl Symposium.
I actually got that page right pulled up because that was the one and only page of this that really honestly bothered me, where I'm like, are you just seriously dumping a Scott McCloud page into the middle of this comic book?
Yep, I think they seriously were just like, this is the point where we geek out about Scott McCloud. Thank you, Scott McCloud.
Well, he thanks Scott McCloud in like the 5th issue, doesn't he? Like
in the beginning of that issue, actually.
Yeah.
The interior cover is, we love you, Scott.
I kind of enjoyed it because that, excuse me, to me felt like Mummy Girl and like how excited she gets about things. Like we go on rants like that all the time, we in this room. So it's not too far of a leap to imagine somebody else who loves comics in a comic would also realistically go into suddenly like, oh yeah, well, like all these things about comics. So to me, it was fully fitting, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
I thought it was cute.
I don't know. Like, I feel like I think Joe feels about Grant Morrison when Grant Morrison goes out about reality is a comic book inside of a comic book. Like, you get a level of self-referentialism that's, I don't want to say, it doesn't diminish the work, but it's distracting.
Yeah. Not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't really bother me. Like, I appreciated the reference. I thought it was, and it's probably a referential, it's like a frame of reference thing, right? Like, I could appreciate this because it wasn't Kirkman doing his whole like thing that he likes to soap when he gets on his soapbox in his comic books, and it's like, opinion time, and I'm like, fuck you and tell the story, dude. I don't give a fuck how you feel about things. Like, seriously. You've already dragged this story out 3 issues longer than it needed to be. Shut the fuck up and finish this. So, this book is charming. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. But I was charmed by it. And I think largely because it did remind me of Teen Titans, and I fucking love that cartoon, like unashamedly. Yeah. Because I think that cartoon does such a good job of balancing. It does such a good job of what Marvel did such a shitty job of doing in the 90s. And one of the things that I think was a failure of the Teen Titans comic book of the New 52, which is the Teen Titans cartoon did a really good job of balancing the silliness and the camaraderie and the kind of togetherness and the importance of the togetherness of the Titans, while also throwing situations at them that had actual consequence. Like, there are points in that, I think it's the first season where Robin is fighting Slade. And I mean, those episodes are weighty. They feel like if Robin is not able to do this, like shit is going to go down. And I think that not a lot of shows targeted at the audience that Teen Titans was targeted at do that very well. You're always like, and this is also a convention of like shonen anime, right? Where it's like, oh, the cliffhanger, will our hero do it? And it's like, yeah, he's going to fucking do it. He's our hero. Like, he'll either do it or some weird circumstance will happen so that he doesn't have to exactly do it, but that'll just make him do better next time.
Mysterious Glasses Man will show up.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. It's like, I choose you.
It's interesting. I never really watched the Teen Titan cartoons.
Well, you weren't a fan of it, I know, at least in the concept of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the visual style was a big thing, and quite frankly, where I set my flag very firmly was a show that is very close to Teen Titans, which is Young Justice.
Right.
And I think I see a lot of synonymous things in the book too, right? Like, I feel like, yeah, they're doing serious things, like but they're also a bunch of teenagers who are just like, like one of the things that I really thought was a great follow through on the Mummy Girl Scott McCloud issue was in the next one. Then Kid Nefarious is reading all the comics that she let him borrow, and he's having like fanboy reactions, like, no way my dad loses, like, these are garbage, blah blah blah, which is pertinent to the story directly, but also is kind of a funny, tongue-in-cheek response to people who like invest so much emotional content into
Wolverine could totally take Lobo.
Yeah, like there's no way the Hulk loses against Superman. Like,
I do want to say something. Yeah. I do not now, nor have I ever, as a comics reading individual, ever believed that Wolverine could take on Lobo.
Because I would.
There were a group of ignoramuses that thought that back in the 90s.
Tell him to get
and if you're one of those people right now, read a fucking Lobo comic book.
Yeah,
right?
Jesus. Hey,
that shit's not happening. I'm sorry. Fight me. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Fucking Joe.
Go downtown.
Wolverine did fight Lobo, and Wolverine beat Lobo. It's canon. I'm sorry.
It's
No.
totally
Isn't
not.
that bullshit.
I'm going to beat Lobo.
Multiverse,
with you.
No,
Final
fuck
Crisis.
it.
No.
No.
Yeah.
Snort, canon bullshit.
I'm
That's
sure
what I say. Because Lobo can kill God, he can kill canon.
I'm pretty
So
sure
fuck
between Mark Silvestri and Rob Liefeld, somebody that looked exactly like Wolverine once fought somebody that looked
Yeah.
exactly like Lobo,
Mhm.
and that may have been a thing.
Preach.
In fact, I'll guarantee you that was a thing at some point.
Hyper
Yeah,
time.
that ain't me. That ain't fucking me.
But yeah, I think that my favorite thing about this book was the visual style of it. Like the colors were really well done. I love the artwork. There were things in it that I was kind of like, I don't fault the book for this. It's very much, I kind of wanted a more laid back slice of life thing because that's kind of where I thought it was going. So that's what I set myself up for.
Yeah.
And so the kind of like reveal at the end with the whole like, oh, they know we're starting a war. I was kind of like, I mean, that could be a good thing. It's not like it didn't bum me out or anything, but it kind of veered away from what I had kind of wanted.
Well, I'll be interested to see what the pacing on volume 2 is like. Because, we had this problem, or at least I certainly had this problem when we were talking about Physics Bureau last week, right? Which is like the tendency for some of these not image, because that's a Vertigo book, but some of these kind of smaller books to feel like they suddenly are kind of getting like super accelerated.
Yes.
And is that an issue of like the publishing or the situation or whatever? So I'd be curious to see if in volume 2 they ratchet back on that, or if it just kind of decides to go whole hog towards it. I feel like there's at least enough footing here where you could kind of play it out, right? Like something's coming, they know they start a war, but it's like for the next 3 months nothing happens and we're back in class. Like you could still have those little vignette pieces, and
because those were definitely my favorite pieces of the whole thing.
So about the art before I forget, so I really like the visual style. I think Armand Villavert does a great job, except for one character. And I wrote myself a couple of notes about this because I was confused because I thought there was a time shift at one point. His drawing, and I realized it might just something about the character's build might make it hard for him. Kid Nefarious. Yes. I have a really hard time telling how old Kid Nefarious is supposed to be because when the series start, I think he's actually like 10 or 11, but then in the middle of the series for a little while, it seems like he's maybe closer to 14 or 15 based on his size relative to other people.
I actually had to go and check after I got into issue 3 because I was like, oh, the artist changed.
Right.
And I had to go back and look, and no, the artist didn't change. And I looked at the previous 2 issues and I was like, wow, the style on this book just kind of subtly shifts. And then shifts back. And it's just kind of like Kid Nefarious, I think, is the worst one out of all of them.
Yeah.
But the way that he's drawn just keeps changing. And like, I think part of it is a style thing because like they do get like more and less chibi-fied.
Right.
Like there is that kind of push and pull
when
there's a more serious moment versus more of a cartoony moment. But it's not just that.
Well, I wonder how. I don't know the history of the artist. I don't know how much more he's done. So it could be that part of it is he's actually learning his like, because you see this on. There's been a handful of books that I feel like you can notice this with, and I'm sure if you go back and look at any given artist's work, like you can see how their style emerges. Like Jim Lee's stuff hasn't changed in 20 years, but it changed a lot in the first 3. Like, so maybe that's just part of it is that he's.
There are also different colorists.
Yeah,
throughout, and there is a time where one colorist is on for issues 1 and 2, a little bit of 3, but not all of it, and then comes back on 4, and then there's a different colorist on 3, and then there's a new colorist.
I remember looking at that
because
because the palette seems softer.
Yeah,
in 3.
So that could affect his age too, a little bit. But yeah, I've noticed that he tends to kind of change.
Yeah,
not shape, like his shape generally stays the same, but size.
Yeah, I think it's
I see a lot of proportions between hands, head, feet. Tend to shift a lot with that character. I kept seeing a lot of like suddenly really huge, like awkward teenager feet, maybe shrunk back a little bit, and like the shoulder width has changed a few times over. Not dependent upon emotional reactions for a panel, like those dramatized or rather like exaggerated expressions.
Right.
There are times that just standing next to other characters I've notice significant differences in proportion.
And it didn't feel like that with any of the other characters, at least not to me.
I
So
didn't
it's like
really
something
feel
about
that.
Nefarious's design or something. Because even his dad, who has a similar style costume, I feel like is consistently proportioned.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's that they're still trying to find exactly what age range they think he's in, or
Well, and I find myself wondering if part of it is Kid Nefarious is definitely, I think, the most dynamic character in terms of like the motions he's making. He's like very dramatic.
Right.
He's very exaggerated, like Kit was saying. And so finding the right kind of style to convey a character like that, I guess, could be tricky.
sure.
Like, I didn't really snap to his age until Mummy Girl kissed him. And I was like, oh, these guys are like mid-school, like older mid-schoolers or like high schoolers. And then kind of things made a little bit more sense at that point as to like their position and stuff.
Well, like I'm going through it and I'm holding up a page where he's literally drawn like an 8 or 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And then and that's from issue 2. And then you skip to issue 3 towards the end when he's saying goodbye to his dad. And it's like every muscle is picked out and he looks like he's aged 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Between those two issues, like there is a very very noticeable.
I mean, unless it's supposed
difference.
to be that, but there's enough things that happen in issue 3 that it's clear that the chronology is relatively tight, because I think that's where they send what's his name to prison and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So it's like, because at first I thought it was literally, oh, there's a time skip.
Well, I think that a lot of the biggest discrepancies happen when he changes costume. Like the panel that you held up, he's in his like gym outfit, so like a white t-shirt and shorts. He's
Right.
also supposed to look dwarfed by the luchador.
El
that they're-
Luchador.
Yeah. And I think maybe it's just it kind of, instead of actually diminishing his size, it kind of babyfied him a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm holding up a page from issue 4 now, and you can see him in his costume, and he's got that more chibi look to him. And I got the sense that they were doing that kind of Teen Titans things where sometimes they're drawn very realistically, and other times like they go cartoony because it's supposed to be a more slapstick moment, like all of them fighting the genie guy. Like that's a funny moment, so it looks less serious.
Luchadini.
But that's really not clear right off the bat.
I insist on it being called the Luchadini.
Luchadini.
What's his, I can't remember his
It's El, I think it's like El Luchador or El
Yeah, like El Champion.
El
Like not,
Campeón.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not,
El Campeón. No, I gotta say, any comic that has lucha in it is an instant win with me.
Well, and that's
By the way,
Yeah, it's El Campeón.
El
Campeón,
Campeón.
that's right.
That's also a reference to another Image book, The
Yeah.
Amazing Joy Buzzards,
Yes, it is.
which is
they worked on as well.
excuse you,
Did
does
it-
that have luchas in it?
yes.
Why haven't we pitched it?
Well, I tried to get my
Show.
hands on it, but I was unable.
Try
Um,
harder.
Well, I'm going to, believe me.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it.
Oh,
if
you are
did.
quite welcome. Don't you get duty with me.
Hey, I'm too duty. Get out.
I think
Too duty
I think
for
the
you.
other interrupting that. I think the other
Don't
reason
you
that
doot me.
the timing of this, like I
Dude
was enchanted
shamer.
with the book, is my 5-year-old son has been listening to my wife start reading him Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Oh my goodness.
And so, like, as my wife reads him things about Hogwarts, he's like, they do what? That's great. Like, kind of stuff. And so, when they're like having monster class and then like magical signs and symbols, I'm like, oh, it's like supervillain Hogwarts.
Oh,
So,
That's very cool. And
Harry
an
Potter is for
aside,
all
but
ages.
going back to something that you referenced a minute ago, I really, really like the way that Kid Nefarious and Mummy Girl's like flirtatious relationship thing advances in this, because they don't beat around the fucking bush for 30 issues.
oh, right.
It's just like, no, she likes him. She kisses him. Like, it's just a thing.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
was
there's
like
some stuff built up.
anti-anime.
Yeah. Like, we could do with an awful lot less just fucking around than happens by and large. Like, I'm kind of just over it.
Yeah. No, that's one of the whole will they, won't they thing is my least. Growing up in an era of Moonlighting and Cheers and just about every other fucking sitcom that had a will they, won't
Ross
they.
and Rachel.
Yeah, like that was the one that pushed me over the edge, actually. The whole Ross and Rachel thing is the reason that to this day and until the day I die, will never fucking watch Friends again. I fucking despise that show. oh my God, fuck that show. Anyways,
So
I like much more
The
when
opinions
it's
of
just
Joe
like,
Preti are not the opinions of You from the Gutters.
oh, whatever.
Come on.
We really alienated half of our audience with the friends comment.
You may have alienated
Chill
half the
fuck
guests
out.
or
I'm like,
half the hosts with your friends'
hey,
comments.
we've had this conversation before, okay? You hate plenty of things I like.
That's true.
So this is,
Fair point.
yes. I really like the whole like, yes, this is going to be a thing, and we're going to write it as if it's a thing because nobody cares after. Like I will stop caring about the whole will they won't they thing after 3 or 4 times. I'm just like, I don't care anymore. I no longer want to watch this.
It's just such an immature attitude, and I think it ties in with that whole DC like you can't have people married because they'd be happy, and we can't have happy characters. It's like you fucking think a marriage is all fucking sunshine and tulips? No. Like, why can't we have characters that are in relationships that are complex?
Yes, and to respond to that, I will say this. Hold on, Kayleigh.
Kayleigh is literally about to explode.
There is a difference between having 2 younger characters that don't know how to express their feelings for each other and having 2 characters that are consistently put in situations where they could say something or try to talk to each other in any kind of way, and they're not simply so that a situation can be drawn out. These are not the same thing. Like building up drama between, or like a subplot where it's like, it's really hard to express myself or whatever. Like, especially like I have social anxiety. It's hard for me to talk to people. There are plenty of things. I'm not saying that everybody in real life is just able to talk to everybody. Like, I can relate to that. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She has social anxiety. I have fucking social anxiety. What I'm saying is that when a situation like that is well written, it doesn't feel like a will they won't they situation. It feels like a natural part of a plot that's being developed. It feels like character development rather than a plot point that's being harped on.
So when you're saying that a point isn't made with some level of depth and efficiency, it feels arduous and difficult to sustain.
Yes. Are you?
Yes.
So Kayleigh, what were you going to say?
Nobody really talks or communicates in that way, do they, Kayleigh?
No, they don't. No, they don't. Okay. So, what I was going to say was that I felt that the representation of relationships was a huge part of this story and was incredibly important because this is very clearly written for a younger audience in mind, right? It's the same audience that would be watching Teen Titans. So the importance of having Mummy Girl and Kid Nefarious having a relationship where they're kind of crushing on each other, and then they actually get to hang out, and then something progresses from that. That's important because it shows this idea of a relationship as a natural progression, but something that takes active effort from both parties. On the other hand, you also see happy families, even though they're villains, and that is hugely important. You see Ghost Girl like sneaking past her family, and her mom is pouring tea for her husband, and is like, they're just talking and being cute. And Mummy Girl, you see her parents, and they're like asleep on the couch together watching TV. And there's another, the biggest one, Kid Nefarious' parents. I don't know what his dad's name is.
Mr. Nefarious?
Mr. Nefarious.
Is it just Mr. Nefarious? Yeah. He goes to fucking some other planet, fights all these sentinels so that he can get a flower to make somebody fall in love with him, and then gives it to Kid's mom. And she's like, this is silly. You know that these don't work on me. Like, and then puts it in a vase with hundreds of other flowers because he does that shit all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's so cute.
But then it's so sad because he gets so dejected when he shows up the next time and they're like, can you please just take this? And like he's just like, oh, but I really wanted to like fight for my love.
My love quest.
Well, then can we also talk about the subversal or like the subversion of expectation in that? Because I fucking loved that. That was one of my favorite moments. Yeah. Because it sets it up to be this whole like, oh, this is the bad guy. Clearly he needs this magical flower to make his wife stay in love with him. Yeah. And then he gives it to her and she's like, oh, you big silly Billy. It doesn't work on me anyways.
Yeah.
You're so sweet. And I was just like, yes.
Yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
so great. No,
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk about this book was a lot of those little clever twists. Not to mention that I feel like the whole, you know how, I mean, we've had these arguments on the show where it's like, if this kind of a world existed, why would X, Y, or Z happen? And so the fact that one of the big, like, kind of overarching themes is the villains realize one day that it's a lot, like, more profitable and it's more balanced to just show up, yell at each other, basically stage a giant, Royal Rumble, and then walk away and go home. Like, what's his name? The gardener's like, yeah, they decided to retire my characters. Like, I was done being a heel, and then they wrote me out.
Sleeves.
Yeah, green sleeves. Like, I just thought I just like that concept where it's like, because then they're like, talking to the people who don't want to do that. And they're like, no, because this is what villainy is about. It's about freedom and just doing whatever you want and, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, yeah, but we have kids and homes and mortgages and...
Yeah,
right.
That's
the
like,
part
that's
that-
cool when you're 15, but, you get older.
It's the part that really reminded me of the Venture Brothers and the whole Guild of Nefarious.
Right,
intent.
Calamitous Intent.
Calamitous and-
Yeah. And just that whole question of, like, how do you sustain a reality of superheroes and supervillains duking it out on the street, fighting for the fate of the world on a daily basis?
Right.
Like, how does that actually legitimately work?
Right, and how do a bunch of, like, supervillains wake up every day and are like, this is a great idea. Let's just keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody hates us.
Well, and I love that it's like villains realize that they could make a hell of a lot more money by hawking action figures and merch.
I do also like the whole conceit of the school, which was that, shitty Z-list wizard tries to steal the playbook of evil Iron Man, and evil Iron Man encases him in stone and makes him the statue of the school he named.
Oh my god.
He's like, yeah, well, you can keep your name on it. That's fine.
Dr. Doomerman.
Yeah.
Dr. Doomerman.
Dr. Doomerman.
It was so
Dr.
cute
Duderman?
because like all those kids come running up to Ironsides, and he's like, "What is this? Who are all these children? Oh, they're cute. Yeah, I'll teach them." Like,
I love the crap out of that.
Oh, but I'm still gonna fucking kill you.
Yeah, I'm still
it's
gonna
like,
kill you,
listen, you're still an asshole, but these kids are great. So,
Yeah.
I think that's probably what appeals to me most about the book is that it is a cool and novel idea. I think that it will be interesting to see where it goes. Like, I'll probably wait until it's all out to read it because that's just how I prefer to read things. Because
if they're doing a Kickstarter, I get the sense that they're probably going to be putting out all of Volume 2 as one piece. Is that
maybe?
correct?
I mean, with the Kickstarter Volume 2, they actually sent it out as singles issues. So
okay,
over the course of the resolution, like because one of the last notes on there was Armand Villavert saying like the last issue has shipped. So looking back at it, it looks like they actually made 6 individual issues. Okay. I didn't look at the Kickstarter rewards to see if there was like a bound compendium or if they're gonna ever.
Well, presumably now that it's all done,
yeah,
they could get somebody, Image or whomever, to actually print a collected trade.
I know that Mark Andrew Smith has been trying to kind of figure that out because I know Sullivan Sluggers was, that was in a self-enclosed graphic, but I know that at one point he was saying like once he did his Kickstarter run, he'd love to get it set up so that basically people could buy it from somewhere. So
yeah. Well, all things become much easier once you have a verified audience that is interested in your work.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. That's not true. I can think of one incredibly damning exception to that
think
rule.
of the exception.
And I'm not going to say what it is.
Rule.
Right, go onto our Facebook page and post what you think I'm talking about.
Do it.
Oh, you could be talking about any number of things.
Yes, but there's one thing in particular that I'm thinking about, which I think because I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to do it.
I have no idea what you're talking about specifically.
Yeah. I'm generating discussion.
Engage. Synchronize.
But yeah, I mean, I think once again, like, I really wanted to talk about FBP and I was really bummed out. I agree with you about the accelerated nature of things, and I think it flies in the face about what we talk about when creators have more control over the length of their series. I find myself wondering, well, if you have a Kickstarter platform and people are interested, as long as you're telling a story that people are interested in, you're going to have as much time as you'd like, right? Because you're being funded by the people that are reading you. And I mean, I can't imagine that they were asking for the millions that people like, the people doing like Shenmue 3 or
right, but that project
Tim What's-His-Fuck from Double Fine wanted to do, you know, whatever kind of
Psychonauts 2.
It's like, yeah, so you know, stuff like that. Like you could do this for probably $25,000 or something like that.
Well, I can't remember how much they ended up raising. They ended up raising over their goal.
Right.
But they had said that it was about $1,000 an issue to make sure that the artist and colorists and editors and everything were paid fairly.
Right.
And anything after that would go to distribution.
Which I think is a pretty normal, like, a pretty normal model for that kind of thing. I know, like, crowdsourcing has made a lot of things possible that were a lot harder in the past. And so ostensibly, if you're only asking for 10 or 20 grand, I mean, a relatively limited audience could raise that, you know, pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you could ostensibly keep a series like this going for quite some time as long as your audience was interested in it.
I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but there's actually a Kickstarter that I'm backing right now for a book that I talked about on Singles Club, Paradox Girl. They produced and printed one issue, and now they're doing a Kickstarter to do issues 2 and 3. And I think they have something like 1,000 backers. They've raised between $25,000 and $30,000 to do the next 2 issues, and reprint the first one as well.
Right.
So it really is within that ballpark.
Yeah.
If I recall, the biggest challenge that Smith ran into with Sullivan Sluggers was around the actual shipping of physical media. Like,
yeah.
It sounds like that was like, and I think he walked away with a lesson learned on that one, and that book was big.
Well,
I remember when Chard was talking about it.
Yeah, there was a whole big kerfuffle with James Stocco and him, and like people taking sides and libelous things being said on the internet, and
yeah.
So I mean, it's tricky, but it does appear that he did take something away from that, seeing as though he's having kind of a...
Yeah, he's doing more. Yeah, I think he's got 3 or 4 different books that he's been funding through Kickstarter.
Right.
So
I mean, it's an interesting thing to me, comic books in the age of crowdfunding, because really, as long as you're not dealing with copyrighted material, you could, as long as you get an audience up there, you can fund what you want, as long as you have the right kind of social media connections and you're smart about it. So that's what's kind of interesting to me, is seeing how that, because like look at The Private Eye, right? I mean, that was online only, and now it's like you can buy a hard copy on Amazon. It collects the whole thing. I'm totally going to buy it because that was amazing, and I love Marcos Martin's art.
I mean, that's exactly what I was saying. Once you have a proven audience, things become more possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm saying yes, in this particular instance, yes, you can. But there have been times in the past where that was not true. So I'm going to need you to add the proviso now. When you have a proven audience, things become a lot easier.
Yeah, now.
Okay. All right.
Are you satisfied, you vulture?
Never. Don't you fucking doot me. I'm the dutiest.
Debatable. Doot-batable.
Whoa, hey.
Yeah.
Double doot back on you.
Step the fuck off.
Does anyone else have any observations about the book?
I'm a little bit short in the whiskers here, just because I mean it's such a short series.
Yeah,
it's
I mean
really,
that is the one
it's really not
disadvantage of pitching
terribly
a series like
dense.
this.
You just shaved.
Ba-dum-bum. Oh.
He did shave.
I will throw this iPad at you. I swear to God. I mean, I feel like we've kind of covered this in broad measures. I mean, it's a great book.
No.
I mean, was there something else that you wanted to say?
No, I mean,
about
I feel
it,
like we
another
kind
topic
of
that you wanted to introduce?
tackled it pretty quickly. No.
I will say that we had a thread on Facebook before the holidays talking about stuff for young adults and stuff. If you know a 12 or 13-year-old that wants to get into comic books, this is a great pick for them. It's right. It's going to be right up their alley.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think it's got some very, very cool, very positive depictions. I really think it's cool that Mummy Girl makes the first move with Kid Nefarious. But I think it's just really, really well done. And I really do like the fact that Kayleigh touched on the happy family thing, because I think there's this like idea that villains have to come from broken homes or whatever.
Sure.
And there's a part of me that's always kind of been enamored of that like villainy that's like the kind of vaudevillain, like, oh yes, I just do this because it's a thing that I do.
Well, it reminded me a lot of Nimona. Very much so. It has a very similar premise, the idea of like state-sanctioned heroes and villains. And a kid who just really wants to be villainous. And in her case, she does come from a broken home, but she finds a new family. And I think that's important. Like, relationships are important, otherwise you don't have interesting characters.
Yes, I think that is... I think that's something we harp on a lot, and I think we harp on it a lot because it's true. It's, I think there's this big push to have drama come out of situations, and I don't necessarily think that's true. I just recorded episodes with John from Arc Reactions for his Bat Books for Beginners series, and we did Bruce Wayne Murderer and Bruce Wayne Fugitive. And we talked about police procedurals, and we talked about how in a good police procedural, you have to have that character development, because otherwise you just have a crime of the week, and that gets old after a while, because there's only so many variations on a crime that you can have, Right. Situations can only provide so much drama, so much interest. You have relationships are what's interesting. And that's, I think, why I get so annoyed when I feel like when I feel a relationship is being milked for whatever reason.
One thing that I did want to mention with the nefarious Skull brothers, the whole scene with them and their mom in the prison is legitimately like 2 or 3 notches creepier than the entire rest of the series.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you definitely get the sense that there is a much deeper and more intense story that we have not yet been introduced to, above and beyond the kind of lighthearted school time hijinks story that we've gotten thus far. And I was specifically left wondering how much of what we're being told is actually true. And I'm speaking specifically of the entire narrated introduction to the series, when there is no other narration in this series.
Right.
Because it's this guy telling us the history of Gladstone School. And is that true? To what extent is it true? Is the person who's behind the Ironsides mask the same person who's always been behind the Ironsides mask? I mean, we never get to see his face, so we have no idea who the fuck he even is. And so,
not post flash forward, right?
And so I'm kind of left wondering if there's not one more shoe to drop, 2 or 3 more shoes yet to drop in terms of what's actually happening. That's
7
too many shoes, Joe.
It's an arachnid, and 1 has already dropped.
Well, no, but I think you're right. I think the series plants a lot of really good seeds, and like it can go deeper, and if it doesn't necessarily go much deeper than that, like I don't feel like I'd be super disappointed, but like there's a lot of possibility.
The guy that's narrating in the beginning also seems to have a somewhat prominent position in the...
Yeah, because he's the head of the court when they go there.
Right.
Yeah,
and so it actually left me reminded a little bit of something like Harry Potter, in the sense that it starts out as this very straightforward, lighthearted, boy goes to magic school, has adventures kind of story. And as it goes on, becomes more mature, darker, deeper, etc. and so forth. And I feel like this is setting up the same kinds of ideas. And I mean, it's obviously getting very quickly into this idea with the court and the prison and all that. Like, there is some serious shit that's going on behind the scenes here. But I feel like that there are a lot of concepts that have been hinted at that we have not seen on screen at all.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about these characters in the sense that Again, just like in Harry Potter, bullying is still a concept. Just because you've found people that are interested in the things you're interested in, or a community that supposedly is pulling the same direction you are for similar values, doesn't mean you won't still find some people that are still the bottom of the pile. With this arrangement of, villains essentially doing their, like, John Cena or whatever for people. There it is. It's there. We've covered it. There's still this understanding that, you have these characters coming later that are talking about, well, we don't really like this arrangement. Don't you see that you're screwed and things like that. And the case with these boys, it's the same kind of thing where when you're disrupting something that everybody says is good and this is the way things should be and normally are and everything else, it's hard when you are the loser or you're in the side of the losers in that battle, and it seems like the deal with their mom and everything else is something that I'm super interested in finding out about, because again, in real life and all sorts of other times, there are still these fringe people that don't benefit from the way things are, and when people notice that, it makes them uncomfortable and it makes them angry. So they're kind of resorting to bullying these boys for the fact that there is something, quote, wrong with their mother and how she does things. I don't know. I'm super intrigued by that, at least too, because yes, we do have villain kids here that essentially just want to play cops and robbers for a living. Because that's the thing real kids do too. Sometimes when you're playing pretend, when you're a child, you just want to be the bad guy. And you don't need a real reason. You don't need to just want to beat up on the other kids or things like that. Sometimes you just want to be the bad guy. So we have these kids like that really do just want to be the bad guy for fun. And then these other kids is that counterbalance to what happens when villainy is justice, which is also a really common thing in comic books, is that you have a whole lot of bad guys that neglect to see how other people don't see that they're the good guy and could easily be right. I definitely want to know more about their family as far as that goes. Because, of course, there's got to be people that are screwed by this arrangement other than her. Mm-hmm. So.
Yes.
I just want to know who the guy is.
Which guy?
The narrator guy.
The guy.
The guy with the cool facial hair.
The dude.
And the gem that looks a lot like Gladstone's gem?
Yes. I didn't even notice that. I'll have to go back and look. I won't go back and look. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to warn you guys.
Yeah, you're just going to.
I've read. So, I rushed through the book that I was going to recommend, and then I realized I don't have to recommend anything tonight. So I'm actually ahead of the game. Woo.
Okay.
So with that in mind, no recommendations.
Ooh.
Are we feeling like we have any other topics we want to address in the show, or do we want to wrap it up here, or where are we at? Where are we at, people?
We have our comment response section. Unfortunately, we didn't get a whole lot of comments to respond to this week. However, there was one thing in the news recently. If we want to shift over to a mini back matter mode here, I did kind of want to talk a little bit about the recent news / rumor mongering, what have you, of DC Reborn. Whatever form that might take.
Not what I thought. Not the news thing that I thought you were going to.
What news thing did you think I was going to talk about?
The Marvel CEO.
Oh,
yeah.
Fuck Ike Perlmutter. That guy's just a cantankerous old bastard.
But no, fuck DC. I'm fucking done. Do you know how many comic shops are probably going to go out of business because they keep fucking rebooting their stupid shit?
Yeah, well, there was actually a news story not too long ago interviewing a number of comic shop owners talking about how both Marvel and DC sales have been down significantly over the last quarter, and laying it at the floor of the constant reboots, constant renumbering, constant relaunches, that's making it incredibly difficult for new readers to get involved.
See, what I actually read was something that was a number of comic store owners who were laying it at the feet of weird stories that are not mainstream, that are not featuring Superman, Batman as they're supposed to be, Justice League, that they're losing, that like, and so basically this is the article I was reading, and man, I wish I could remember where I found it so that I could link in the show notes, was talking about how when the New 52 launched, like sales were up real big, and the sales were highest in those like mainstream core books, Batman, Green Lantern, Superman, and that as DC's been fucking with things, and Marvel too, like those are like they're losing those sales in these particular comic stores. We're talking about how like good for you having your like boutique off kilter interesting character thing, like that isn't selling hundreds of thousands of books or tens of thousands of books a month, and my shop is going to close because you're not giving me a Justice League book that I can put big numbers behind.
And I think part of this might be a mixture of the two things. That on one hand you have the longtime fans, the hardcore buyers who are being put off with how many changes there are, how many new versions of characters are being introduced. And at the same time, you have newer readers being alienated or having a hard time getting in because of the constant relaunches, the constant number ones, all the variant covers, all that happy horse shit. And between the two of those things, it seems like Marvel and DC are doing themselves an incredible disservice. I was actually just talking about this with Adam, that there were a number of storylines that were going on in Marvel, which they stopped to do Secret Wars for 9 months.
Yep, and then they didn't release it on time.
Yeah.
And 3 stores that had members in the Valkyries ended up closing because of Secret Wars.
Yeah.
Because they stopped all of their storylines. They weren't releasing anything. And that's where they get... That's like their bread and butter. That's what keeps the lights on.
Right.
And then they had that hiatus where issue 9 of Secret Wars or whatever didn't fucking come out as scheduled. And then it still didn't come out. And then it still didn't come out. And by the time it did come out, nobody cared anymore and people had stopped reading it.
Well, there wasn't even originally supposed to be a number 9. It was supposed to be an 8-issue series. But by the time most of a year later that they actually wrapped all of that up, a lot of those stories are gone and they're not coming back because they've moved on to other things. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who's been reading comics for 20 years, it's actually incredibly frustrating to me.
But is it new?
No, well, this is the problem.
This is the evolution of something that's been going on for many, many years.
Event books, traditionally event books have posted higher numbers, and so you get into this cycle where it's like, okay, our numbers are flagging, we'll have an event, rather than our numbers are flagging. What are people? Let's look at the market. Let's look at what people want. Let's look at the creative teams we have. Let's trust our fucking creative teams to do something interesting. Like, the market is not... This is the whole problem with the New 52, is that they were catering to this really tiny part of the market that initially was very strong, but then you can get a lot more shit now. You can get shit digitally now. I mean, you can get shit on Amazon for a quarter of the price that you can get it. Well,
I think that's the thing. As we were talking about earlier, the market isn't now what it was 15 years ago. People have more options. Marvel and DC have been doing the event dance for decades now. Marvel has had a summer event every single year for at least 15 years, but the marketplace isn't in the same place that it was back then, and I think that people have more options now.
But cheaper options.
Well, arguably, yeah. But so here, I've been meditating about this a lot, and I think I used to be meditating. I meditate. I want to meditate. I want other people to meditate. I've been thinking a lot about this in the last couple of weeks because I think that I had constructed, based on what I had read and what I felt about the moves that these companies have made, similar to what you guys are saying, right? Like they were short-sighted, they were greedy, they did these things, it was stupid. But I actually feel like now, looking at some of this intense mixture of commentary that I've seen from storefronts, some of the stuff that I've been reading online and some of the things that I've been thinking about my own readership and how it affects the industry and all of these things. And I've come to the conclusion that, at least for my part personally, that I think DC did exactly what the market demanded of them, what exactly their readers, both new and old, were clamoring for. They tried to find the best balance of catering to both, and they actually succeeded resoundingly well in some ways. And that basically they had, like, people got really pissed off, right? Like, there were a bunch of new 52 books that were really dynamic and interesting, Animal Man and all these things. Now, it sounds like there was personality conflicts and creative conflicts and editorial conflicts, but also, the number crunchers at the top of that bean pile were using cold hard fact. Like, great, Animal Man was, lauded and all of this crap. It didn't move enough books. You're shit canned. Deadstroke, you didn't move enough books. You're shit canned. You know what I mean? It's like, so Batman, you sold enough books. Congratulations. You get 4 Batman books a month now. Like, and it's kind of one of these things where it's like, I feel like the reality that has emerged, and this is something that's really big in gaming that I think comics has kind of like weirdly echoing, like 5 years behind. Like, the reality is now for the average game store, and of course we're blessed in this city that we've got game stores and comic book stores, and in one case they are both the huge. It is one huge institution, and it is both. But like, one of the big conversations that came up around gaming in the last few years is, you will never win for the price of your product. You need to create something else than the product you're selling to motivate people to get off their ass and not buy off of Amazon, right? So, like, gaming stores went through this, and they're still struggling with this concept of, like, what do you do to make your gaming store a place where community wants to build? And we got lucky. We never had that problem in this town. But for the gaming store that I used to live at, that's what fucking killed it, was that you could buy all the product they had cheaper on this new thing called eBay, and then this gigantic company that showed up right down the road called Amazon. But we had tables, and we had space, and we had all of these things, but we didn't foster that environment. We treated that as secondary to the sales, and so the store part failed. And so, like, part of me is like, I feel really sympathetic to these comic stores on both ends of the spectrum who are like, I don't have enough things to hand to readers, or I don't have enough things to keep my existing readers happy. But my observation is, like, if you're one set of publishers' whims away from closing your doors, you weren't in a good place anyway. You can be mad at Marvel for not pushing Secret Wars on time, but if that's literally what put the nail in your coffin, your store was gonna,
things were not going well.
Things were not going well. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and I think that's the problem with this argument is, like, you can't complain about, or I mean, you can, but it seems problematic to me to be like, DC, why are you constantly rebooting shit, but then also complaining where it's like, you don't try enough things that are new, you don't try enough things that are dynamic, you don't try these new things. And it's like, all evidence suggests that they're trying to put creator teams together, right? Like, Batgirl has gone off like gangbusters, Grayson has sold great, Midnighter has been a big hit, like, they're pushing more, but like, New 52 had to happen, and all of that spaghetti had to be thrown at a wall to get those teams together, to let those things happen in the middle of, corporate bullshit politics.
Well,
stuff.
I agree with you. And I don't think, what I think is going on is that there are a number of factors that are going on, and they're just happening to go on at the same time. I think I agree with you about the New 52. The New 52 did exactly what it was supposed to do until what it seemed like it happened was DC just kind of clamped down on everybody and said, well, there's our vision, and we don't care about your creative vision unless it fits into our vision. And they lost some huge names doing that.
Right, but they also built up some huge names.
Well, yeah, but you had Scott Snyder writing like 6 Batman books and Superman and Green. It was like, okay,
It wasn't just him.
Well, it wasn't. No, it was him and Jeff Johns.
No, and Tomasi, and, you had other...
But when you look at the talent they started with,
well,
I mean...
Yeah, but...
Nobody was leaving DC at that point because it was like, oh, I don't have any more stories to tell. They were all leaving because DC was saying, you can't do what you want to do.
Yeah, but I mean, but here's the thing is that I feel like we entered into a period of time where, like, the artist the artist is important, right? The artist has vision. The artist should be able to pursue vision. I think that's a big deal. And we live in a time where art is being democratized in a really powerful way. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very easy for us to side with artists in a certain sense. So, and especially in certain media and mediums like music, when some bullshit producer's like, I don't make $30 million anymore, I'm like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah,
I would much rather that these local bands sell 50,000 albums and that there's 1 million of those than there's 4 Britney Spears making however many millions of dollars.
Oh, I agree.
Like Gene Simmons can suck it as far as I'm concerned in his bullshit
he could
posturing about the change, the music industry's changed.
Huh.
But mass market superhero comics is this really interesting twist where it's we have these creators who are lauded for their vision or these runs that were created, but even the best writers did so under the stewardship of corporate guidance and editorial leadership. And so I feel like what's happened is that now there's a lot of platforms where when somebody like Rob Liefeld walks away from DC, just as an audacious example, where he's like, they didn't want me to do what I want to do. It's like, well, fuck, I don't want you to do what you wanted to do.
That is totally fair.
And so it's I get it. Like Jeff Lemire, he's a fantastic author. He's written some really interesting stuff. I don't personally like it. So when he when he decides to leave Animal Man, or when he's kicked off Animal Man because some editor's like, hey, buddy, it ain't pushing the numbers we need. On one hand, I want to sympathize where it's like, oh, you didn't get to do the vision of what you wanted to see. But on the flip side, I'm like, then go write a book of your own.
Which I totally agree with. And that's the point I'm not arguing is that, oh, poor artist. These guys did go and do books on their own and they were it's when you look at the Hollywood system of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, right? You had everybody wanted the big budget numbers, right? But you had the big budget numbers so that you could also have the critically lauded stuff. Now, at that point, a lot of them were one and the same. You had critically lauded pictures that were also to put up huge numbers at the box office, right? But ideally, you want your powerhouses to be funding the stuff that's maybe not pushing. See, they won't release their numbers to us, so we have no idea what Animal Man was making. So was it an issue where it was a complete failure, or was it not making DC?
Well, here's
whatever.
Here's the thing, and I think that Brant's point about the music industry is well taken. I think it was Jamie McKelvey, who's the artist on Phonogram, did a series of posts on Twitter not too long ago talking about the financials of printing a book at Image or in an independent way, basically saying if you can move 10,000 copies, you're getting by, you're doing okay. You're not going to be getting rich off of it, but you can make it from month to month. By the time you hit 20,000 copies, which is what The Wicked and the Divine is doing, and is considered a big success as an independent book, you're fucking cock of the walk. You are buying all of your friends' drinks because you are doing great. At 20,000 copies at DC or Marvel, your book is getting shit canned.
Right.
That's just not good enough. The level of difference between what you need to move as an independent creator versus creating it for corporate comics cannot be overstated.
Well, that's overhead. I mean, so at least some of that's overhead, right?
Yeah. There's
an entire editorial bullpen, and that's an entire layer of quote unquote producers,
people like Ike Perlmutter.
Yeah.
You have to pay them.
Yeah.
Do we really have to though? Can't we just string them up?
Not if you buy independent comics. But I think that there's something to be said for an industry where you have, hundreds of independent creators who can move 10, 15, 20,000 copies of a book versus one that supports 30 creators who can move 60, 70, 80, 100,000 books.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it means that the industry is going to have to change.
And I feel like the industry is changing, and I feel like this is the part that I'm I don't understand some of the weird cynicism about it, right? Yes, Marvel and DC are always going to make initial moves that are attempts to maximize their profit. That is part of their function, especially now that they've been more fully absorbed into their motherships. That said, all evidence suggests that, at least up until recently, the likes of like Perlmutter actually managed to keep Disney out of his shit and kept Kevin Feige from crapping on his sandwich, and actually was more doing it the other way, saying, no, my writers need to be able to be there to help guide the vision based on what we create. Like, you may not like him, but all evidence suggests that actually he was very effective at throwing elbows to basically make sure that the writing part of Marvel had some sort of say over the stuff that was being taken from them to gestate in other mediums.
Right.
So, but I mean, I guess for me, it's like, I have sat there and read Superman books for the better part of 20 years now. And I love me a good old fashioned, guy in red shorts, knuckle dusting against an android from another world. But there are times where I'm like, I want to see something different. And I'll be goddamned if a shaved, not very close to being mortal guy walking around in a t-shirt is not as far as fucking as it gets from the guy that I'm used to. Like, I can't sit there and be like, I want something different, and then be like, well, fuck you, you gave me something different. Like, if anything, DC has proven since New 52 that they're willing to let all kinds of fucking things go to try to, and yes, some of it's motivated by greed or whatever, but I mean, I think some of it is also that they had creators who stuck with them, who put up with the bullshit and have said, hey, I want to try something, and they're like, all right, we'll go for it.
Well, because they're all out of ideas.
I think that one of the big issues here, and maybe Kayleigh could speak to this better than I can, is that you have on the business side an industry that is predicated on one distribution company.
Well, yeah, that's a huge problem.
Moving a large number of books for DC and Marvel, which is what keeps a lot of these stores afloat, to the extent that Marvel having a bad quarter is enough to put stores out of business.
Yeah, well, and the problem is that it's never really just a store failing at the whims of one publisher. It's a store that's failing because people are buying digital now, and they just simply don't have that community where they exist to keep their store afloat. And then you have Diamond, if you're US based, fucking you over all the goddamn time. Like, Diamond is awful. I cannot tell you how many books we miss every single week. Or how many subscribers of ours just never get their comics. Because what will happen is Diamond will short us. They'll short us 100, 200 books. And then we'll go, where did they go? They're like, oh, well, just reorder them. We didn't charge you for them. So just reorder them. So then we do. And then they're like, oh, well, you can't because we're sold out now. And no, they're not being reprinted. And no, you're not being credited back. So, and that happens to us fairly frequently. That happens to every other store in the country. All the time. On a weekly basis. Where people have pre-ordered things, people are subscribed to things, and they don't get them. Or when they do get them, they're in such poor quality that they have to be sent back.
Yeah, I mean, that's a niche market problem, unfortunately. I mean, that's the same on the game side. That's the same on the novelty collection side. Like, I remember bringing in cases of, specialty toy product, and it's like, well, the one of 10, one every 10 case figure is trashed. It's like, yep, sorry. Yeah, you're gonna order another 10 cases, I guess. It's like, what?
I had a really great conversation about this with Patrick Mapp on an episode of Back Matter a little while ago. Just kind of talking about the history of Diamond and how they became a monopoly, and when Marvel actually tried to challenge them by creating their own distribution system back in the 90s, which is part of what tanked Marvel and tanked the comic industry as a whole when that just went completely to shit. So, like, I mean, there is a lot more complexity to this situation than simply like, hey, Marvel and DC, put out better books. Yeah. And I don't know, like there isn't a clear and easy answer because you have to address it on so many different levels.
Yeah, I guess my observation that is ringing based on you saying that is that I feel like, Joe made a comment about the old studio model, and I feel like that model still exists at the big two. Like, I think that there are some books that are getting a standing amount of critical acclaim. They are not pushing the numbers that are probably sustaining that as a business choice compared to others. Right. But I think they're, actually, I know of a perfect example. And it's a book that I intend to pitch soon, which is The Omega Men, which apparently almost got the chopping block after its first issue, but it has risen to an astounding critical success within Marvel. but it's the Omega Men. Like, it's based on a weird...
You mean
obscure,
DC?
Yeah, or DC, excuse me.
Yeah.
But it's based on a weird, kind of relatively obscure thing, but apparently everybody who touches that book thinks it's gold, but not in the sales sense. But DC is firmly committed to continuing to push it because it's just out there as something that people really are enjoying.
Well, my understanding is that it was canceled, and then because of the fan outpouring, it was uncanceled.
Right. Like, there was enough concentrated people able to do that. And like, that's one of the good things about social media, but I think that it's just, yeah, the diamond thing is really messed up and it's super screwy. And I know that there's a lot of analogies in other markets. You know, I remember that there was a couple of game companies that just recently came out and said, hey, we're only going to distribute our games through very specific people because of these business factors. You're only going to be able to buy online from our vendors who we pre-approve. And there were a bunch of independent retailers who were like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, how are we going to make, like, you're just ripping these games from us? And basically the counter argument was, well, yeah, but we have a bunch of people who are buying our product and short selling it, or, never moving that product or what have you. And it's funny because I know that happens in comics too, where it's like there's a bunch of these comic stores, they're failing. So they probably got 100 copies or, between 3 of them that could have moved in another store, but never did because of the distro model and the rewards based behind it and all this crazy crap. And so I think that's all messed up. But I think coming back to the heart of the whole DC Reborn thing, like, clearly they feel like they've got another shot at things with Superman and Batman coming out. Because apparently that's what a lot of their motivation is they're going to reboot Trinity as a cornerstone comic. Wonder Woman's sales apparently have tanked through the floor because basically all the magic and the goodwill that Chang and Azzarello built has been lost.
Yeah, well, look at who you got to fucking write it.
Well, there was I think it was Digital Legends of Wonder Woman.
Yeah, which apparently is done,
which is, again, critical acclaim through the roof.
And so, and there was rumors that actually those are some of the teams that are going to be brought back under DC. Like, and so that's my problem, is that on one hand, I see people being like, oh my God, a new number one, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, a lot of people don't seem to like shaved head Superman. I'm happy to have him back in his regular costume if that's what I get. Like, apparently Wonder Woman's not good. There's another team that's been doing it better. Batgirl has been fantastic. They want to make that kind of the tone of a bunch of other books. Like, and if they're like, we're going to do a company-wide launch like this, I'm like, great, thanks. Like, I don't personally. My whole thing about it now is that I said this to Joe about New 52. Like, in theory, it could work great. We'll see what they do. And like, I have the same thing with DC Reborn in the post Secret Wars universe and Marvel. And it sounds like Marvel's having the same problem. Like, half the ideas are really hot and they're gonna work, and other ones, it's like, wait, when are we ever gonna go back to what we were talking about before? Yeah, that happened in comics all the time. So I guess I'm not so. I
guess it's more that it wasn't just one book where that happened. Right, it was like 5.
Right, it happened a lot at the same time.
Well, it just goes to show you that if you're going to wish for something different, wish for something different and good.
Yeah.
Because different on its own is not always great.
Well, I'm glad that we got the time and the opportunity to kind of chew this over a little bit. Was there anything else from the realm of comics that we wanted to discuss, or are we ready to wrap up for this week?
I'm ready to wrap, yo.
All right. Well, we will be back next week talking about the book that we picked last week, which is My Friend Dahmer, which was our Patreon fan pitch from Brian May. So thank you very much, Brian, for that pitch. We're looking forward to talking about it, and we will see you all next time. Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
This has been a production of View from the Gutters. We hope you'll join us next time for discussion of our selected title. In the meantime, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Become a sponsor of the show at patreon.com/viewfromthegutters, or leave us a review on iTunes, as it does help new listeners find the show. We encourage you to send any questions, comments, or recommendations you may have to contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep reading.
Episode 154. This is Brant Gillihan-Eddy.
I'm Joe Doot Preti.
Wow.
Kayleigh just fed me a fucking cookie, and I'm Kit Deforge. Fuck.
Look at the little saboteur.
Go to hell,
You broke Kayleigh.
You know,
Okay, to be fair,
This is
I
what
was
happens when you
not-
try and start an episode.
yeah. And scene. All right, that was a great take, everybody. Let's try it again from the top.
Yes. Let's do that thing.